The Great Hall of the Galactic Federation Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated zones, each area carefully designed to accommodate different atmospheric needs and physical forms. The Zephyrians floated in their methane bubbles while the rock-like granite lords sat motionless on reinforced platforms. At the center, the elegant Altarian mediator raised her forearms for silence. The petition from species designation human has been reviewed, her melodic voice carried through the translation systems. They request full membership in the Galactic Federation. A ripple of amusement passed through the assembly. The slug-like Malari ambassador released pheromones that translated as barely contained laughter. These primates have been observing our transmissions for less than 50 of their years. They understand nothing of civilized warfare. The Altarian mediator gestured toward the holographic display floating above the council floor. Earth appeared in stunning detail, its blue oceans and white clouds slowly rotating. Our cultural analysis teams have studied their history extensively. The humans show concerning patterns. The display shifted, showing scenes from human history, ancient armies clashing with bronze weapons, medieval knights charging across battlefields, massive wars involving millions of soldiers and terrible weapons. The assembled aliens watched with a mixture of disgust and fascination. "Look at this savagery," the crystalline shard delegate chimed, their voice like breaking glass. "They fight constantly. No honor, no structure, no proper rules. How can such barbaric creatures join our peaceful federation?" A deep rumble came from the Ursai sector. The bear-like creatures were known for their military traditions, though even they followed the ancient codes of combat. Their conflicts involve entire populations. They show no understanding of limited warfare. This is not how civilized beings settle disputes. The Altarian mediator nodded slowly. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Federation had maintained peace through proper channels. When disputes arose between member species, they were settled through established protocols. Single combat between champions was the preferred method. Sometimes small military units would engage in structured battles with clear rules and limited objectives. The idea was to minimize casualties while maintaining honor for all sides. "Perhaps," suggested the ethereal Voidborn representative, their form shifting like smoke, "we should give them a chance to learn proper civilization, a probationary membership with appropriate guidance." The Granite Lord delegate spoke for the first time in the session, their voice like grinding stone. "The Kethtar Imperium has been raiding our border worlds again. Small incursions, nothing major. Traditional response would be to send a regiment or 2 for a proper engagement. Why not let the humans handle this? They can learn how real warfare is conducted." Murmurs of agreement spread through the council. The Kethtar were known troublemakers, but their raids followed traditional patterns. They would attack a world with limited forces, engage any defenders in honorable combat, take what they wanted, and leave. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. It was all very civilized, really. "An excellent suggestion," the Altarian mediator said. "The humans can be assigned to respond to Kethtar incursions. Our military advisors will guide them in proper galactic warfare doctrine. This will serve as their test for full membership." The vote was unanimous. Even species that had never agreed on anything before found common ground in their amusement at the idea of watching primitive humans try to understand real combat. 3 weeks later, the human delegation arrived at Federation Central Command. Admiral Sarah Chen stepped off the transport ship, followed by her staff officers. The alien observers had expected something more primitive, perhaps crude armor and simple weapons. Instead, they saw humans in practical uniforms carrying advanced communication devices and data tablets. "Welcome to the Federation military structure," General Thaxui of the Reptilian Coalition said, his forked tongue tasting the air. "We will teach you how civilized species conduct warfare." Admiral Chen smiled politely. "We appreciate any guidance you can provide. Could you brief us on the tactical situation with the Kethtar?" The briefing room filled with representatives from dozens of species, all eager to observe and instruct the newcomers. General Thaxui activated the holographic display showing the border region where Kethtar raids occurred. "The Kethtar follow traditional raiding patterns," he explained. "They arrive with a small fleet, usually 2 to 3 ships. They land forces on a target world, engage local defenders, capture resources, and depart. Standard response is to send an equivalent force to meet them in honorable combat." "What about civilian populations?" Admiral Chen asked. The question puzzled the alien observers. Civilians are not military targets. The Aquarian delegate gurgled from his water tank. That would be uncivilized. Combatants fight combatants. It has always been this way. And logistics? Asked Colonel Martinez, Chen's operations officer. Supply lines, reinforcements, communication networks? More confused looks. Each engagement is self-contained, General Thaxui explained slowly. Forces arrive, fight, and conclude the battle. There is no need for extended operations. Admiral Chen exchanged glances with her staff. I see, and rules of engagement? Standard galactic combat protocols, chimed the crystalline shard observer. Formal declaration of battle. No attacks during rest periods, no targeting of non-military infrastructure. Victory is achieved when one side yields or withdraws. Yields? Colonel Martinez raised an eyebrow. Of course, said the Malari ambassador, releasing pheromones of confusion. When defeat is certain, the losing side formally surrenders. The winners claim their objective and both sides withdraw. It maintains honor for all participants. The human officers took notes, asking detailed questions about fleet compositions, typical engagement duration, and historical precedents. The alien observers found their thoroughness amusing if unnecessary. You will learn, General Thaxui said with what he thought was encouragement. Your first assignment will be to respond to the next Kethtar incursion. We have detected scout ships in the Hadrian system. They will likely attack the mining colony on Hadrian Prime within the next few days. What forces are available to us? Admiral Chen asked. Standard response package, the Altarian military coordinator replied. 1 cruiser, 2 frigates, and a battalion of ground forces. Quite sufficient for a proper engagement with Kethtar raiders. Admiral Chen nodded. We'll need time to prepare and review our options. Preparation is important, agreed the Voidborn tactical advisor. Though do not overthink the situation. Kethtar raiders are predictable. They will follow standard patterns. You simply need to meet them with appropriate force and engage according to galactic combat protocols. As the briefing concluded, the alien observers felt confident about the upcoming demonstration. They would finally see humans learn proper civilization. The primitive species from Earth would discover that real warfare was about honor, structure, and controlled violence, not the chaotic brutality they had practiced on their backward world. Admiral Chen and her staff returned to their assigned quarters to plan their response. The aliens had no idea that Sarah Chen was a graduate of the Combined Arms Staff College, with 3 decades of experience in asymmetric warfare. Her operations officer had planned counterinsurgency campaigns on 4 different continents. Her intelligence chief had spent years studying enemy patterns and weaknesses. They began their preparation the way humans always had when facing a new enemy. They gathered intelligence, analyzed weaknesses, and planned for every possible contingency. The galaxy was about to learn what a human professional army truly was. But first, the humans needed to understand exactly what they were fighting and why the established rules existed. The education was about to begin for both sides. The human fleet arrived at Hadrian Prime 3 days ahead of schedule. General Thaxui and the other alien military observers watched from the Federation monitoring station as the human ships took positions around the mining colony. What they saw confused them immediately. Why are there so many ships? Asked Commander Veltar of the Aquarian Defense Force, her gills fluttering with concern. The briefing specified 1 cruiser and 2 frigates. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the communication system. The UES Normandy, 2 frigates and their support vessels have arrived on station. We're beginning our operational assessment. Support vessels? General Thaxui's tongue flicked out nervously. What support vessels? The display showed the human formation in detail. The main combat ships were there as requested, but they were accompanied by a fleet train that seemed excessive to the alien observers. Supply ships, repair vessels, communication relays, and several ships whose purpose was unclear. Admiral Chen, the Altarian coordinator, called. Please explain the additional vessels. Standard protocol calls for a limited engagement force. Standard human protocol requires proper logistics support. Chen replied calmly. We don't operate our forces without adequate supply lines and maintenance capability. On the planet's surface, the human battalion was doing things that made no sense to the watching aliens. Instead of simply setting up a defensive position and waiting for the Kethtar to arrive, they were spreading across the entire mining colony. Teams of engineers were digging positions that seemed far too elaborate for a simple raid response. What are those humans doing? The Shard observer chimed with confusion. They appear to be fortifying the entire settlement. Colonel Martinez responded to their queries. We're establishing defensive positions and improving the colony's infrastructure. Standard preparation for potential combat operations. The alien observers watched in bewilderment as humans worked around the clock. They were not just digging fighting positions. They were improving the colony's communication systems, reinforcing buildings and installing equipment that the aliens didn't recognize. Teams of specialists were interviewing colonists and studying detailed maps of the surrounding terrain. This is highly irregular, General Thaxui complained. Kethtar raids follow established patterns. You simply need to position your forces to meet them in open combat when they arrive. We prefer to be thorough, Admiral Chen said. Our intelligence teams are analyzing Kethtar tactics and capabilities. We want to understand our enemy before we engage them. Intelligence teams? The concept puzzled the Federation observers. Kethtar raiders had been conducting similar operations for decades. Their methods were well known and predictable. They would arrive with 2 or 3 ships, land a few hundred warriors, fight whoever was there to fight them, and take what they came for. Sometimes they won, sometimes they lost. It was all very straightforward. What the humans were doing seemed unnecessarily complicated. They had divided their forces into multiple groups with different assignments. Some were preparing defensive positions. Others were conducting what they called reconnaissance patrols in the surrounding area. A third group was working with the colonists on something called evacuation procedures. Evacuation procedures? The Molari observer gurgled with confusion. Why would civilians need to evacuate? This is a military engagement between combatants. Standard human doctrine is to remove non-combatants from potential combat zones, explained Major Kim, the human liaison officer assigned to work with the Federation observers. We minimize civilian casualties whenever possible. The aliens exchanged confused looks. Civilians were not targets in galactic warfare. Everyone knew that. It was one of the fundamental rules of civilized combat. You fought military forces, not civilian populations. On the 4th day, Kethtar scout ships appeared at the edge of the system. The alien observers expected the traditional sequence of events to begin. The Kethtar would scan the system, identify their target, and send a formal challenge for combat. Instead, something unprecedented happened. Unknown vessels. Admiral Chen's voice carried across all communication channels. You are entering Federation space without authorization. State your intentions immediately. The Kethtar response came after several minutes. We are Kethtar raiders. We claim the mining colony on this world by right of combat. Prepare your forces for honorable battle. Negative, Chen replied. This colony is under Federation protection. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. General Thaxui activated his communicator urgently. Admiral Chen, you must follow proper protocols. Accept their challenge and arrange for formal combat. We don't recognize their right to challenge anyone, Chen said. They're invaders in Federation space. We're treating them as hostile forces. The Kethtar fleet moved into assault positions, clearly expecting the usual response. 3 ships carrying approximately 400 warriors, just as the intelligence reports had predicted. They began their approach to the planet, following patterns that had worked for them countless times before. What happened next shocked every alien observer. Instead of waiting to meet the Kethtar in formal ground combat, the human fleet immediately engaged them in space. The Normandy and her escorts opened fire while the raiders were still forming up for their landing approach. This is not proper protocol, General Thaxui protested. You are supposed to allow them to land and deploy before engaging. Why would we do that? Colonel Martinez asked over the communication system. Stopping them before they reach the planet protects both our forces and the civilian population. The space battle was unlike anything the Federation observers had seen. Human ships coordinated their fire in complex patterns, using tactics that seemed to anticipate every Kethtar movement. The raiders, trained for straightforward combat, found themselves fighting an enemy that refused to follow expected rules. One Kethtar ship managed to break through the human space defense and reached the planet's surface. The alien observers expected to finally see traditional ground combat begin. Instead, they watched in amazement as the landed Kethtar forces walked into what could only be described as a carefully prepared trap. The humans had not simply positioned their forces to meet the enemy. They had studied the terrain, identified the most likely landing sites, and prepared the battlefield in advance. Hidden positions, pre-planned fields of fire, and obstacles that channeled the Kethtar forces into killing zones. How did they know where to position their defenses? The Voidborn observer asked, their smoky forms shifting with confusion. We analyzed their previous operations, Major Kim explained. Kethtar raiders follow predictable patterns. They prefer flat landing sites near their objectives with clear lines of advance. We simply prepared for the most likely scenarios. The Kethtar warriors, brave and skilled fighters, found themselves facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Human forces appeared from concealed positions, struck quickly, and disappeared before the raiders could respond effectively. When the Kethtar tried to advance, they discovered that the humans had somehow turned familiar terrain into a maze of obstacles and deadly crossfire zones. This is not honorable combat. The Kethtar commander broadcast on open channels. Face us in proper battle. We are fighting, Admiral Chen responded. We're just fighting to win. The engagement lasted 6 hours instead of the usual several days. When it ended, the surviving Kethtar forces were in full retreat, their ships damaged and their ground forces scattered. They had expected to face an enemy that would fight according to established rules. Instead, they had encountered something they didn't understand and couldn't counter. As the human forces began securing the battlefield and accounting for their victory, the Federation observers struggled to process what they had witnessed. The humans had not just won the engagement. They had dominated it so completely that the Kethtar barely seemed to pose a threat. How? General Thaxui asked finally. How did you achieve such a decisive victory? Admiral Chen's response would echo through Federation military academies for generations to come. We prepared for war, she said simply. Real war. The emergency session of the Federation Military Council convened just 12 hours after the Hadrian Prime engagement ended. Representatives from 37 species filled the secure briefing chamber, their confusion and concern evident in every translation. Matrix and pheromone cloud, the humans have created a significant diplomatic incident, announced High Command Velnari of the Altarian Defense Force. The Kethtar are demanding explanation for what they call uncivilized warfare. General Thaxui activated the holographic display, showing tactical recordings from the recent battle. Observe their methods. They refused formal challenge protocols. They attacked ships before ground forces could deploy. They used concealed positions and terrain modification to create unfair advantages. The assembled military leaders watched the recordings with growing alarm. Everything about the human approach violated established norms of civilized warfare. Where was the honor? Where were the rules that kept conflict contained and manageable? Perhaps we should discuss this directly with the human commanders, suggested Commander Vorth of the Centaurian. They may not understand our concerns, Admiral. Chen and her staff entered the briefing chamber an hour later. The human officers appeared calm and professional, showing none of the shame or confusion the aliens expected after such a breach of protocol. Admiral, High Command Velnari began carefully. We need to discuss your recent engagement with Kethtar forces. There are concerns about your tactical approach. What concerns? Chen asked, settling into the provided chair. We successfully defended the colony and repelled the raiders. Mission accomplished. But your methods, General Thaxui protested. You violated every principle of honorable combat. No formal challenges, no fair positioning. You used deception and ambush tactics. Admiral Chen looked genuinely puzzled. Why would we give our enemies advantages? The objective was to defend the colony and neutralize the threat. We accomplished both goals with minimal friendly casualties. Minimal casualties? The Aquarian representative gurgled in distress. You achieved total victory. The Kethtar had no chance to demonstrate their fighting skills or claim honor in defeat. That was the point, Colonel Martinez interjected. We wanted to end the threat as quickly and decisively as possible. The alien military leaders struggled to explain concepts they had taken for granted for millennia. The purpose of warfare was not simply to achieve objectives. It was to maintain balance, allow all sides to demonstrate their capabilities, and preserve honor for both winners and losers. You don't understand, Commander Veltar explained, her gills fluttering with agitation. Combat serves social and cultural functions beyond simple victory. It establishes hierarchy, demonstrates valor, and maintains stability through controlled conflict. With respect, Admiral Chen replied. We understand combat very differently. For humans, warfare exists to achieve specific objectives as efficiently as possible. Honor comes from protecting those under our care and completing our mission. High Command Velnari decided to demonstrate proper warfare to the humans through practical example. We will arrange a formal engagement between Federation forces and volunteer Kethtar units. You will observe how civilized species conduct proper military operations. The demonstration took place in the Kepler system 3 weeks later. Human observers watched from designated positions as Federation forces prepared to engage a Kethtar raiding group. Everything followed established protocols perfectly. The Kethtar fleet arrived on schedule and broadcast their formal challenge. The Federation response force, carefully matched to provide balanced opposition, accepted the challenge and arranged for honorable ground combat. Both sides deployed to opposite ends of a suitable battlefield and prepared for engagement. Notice the structure, General Thaxui explained to the watching humans. Equal forces, fair terrain, clear rules of engagement. Both sides will have opportunities to demonstrate their capabilities. The battle began at dawn with traditional ceremonies. Warriors from both sides advanced across the designated battlefield, engaging in individual combat or small unit actions. When one side gained advantage, they would press forward. When they met strong resistance, they would fall back and regroup. Admiral Chen and her staff watched in fascination as the engagement continued for 3 days. Neither side sought decisive advantage. When the Kethtar forces showed signs of being overwhelmed, they withdrew to defensible positions. When Federation forces pushed too aggressively, they pulled back to allow their opponents to recover. This is not warfare, Colonel Martinez whispered to his commander. This is performance art. On the 3rd day, the Kethtar commander formally acknowledged defeat after losing approximately 30% of his forces. The Federation commander accepted the surrender graciously, allowed the raiders to withdraw with their honor intact, and both sides began departing the system. You see, General Thaxui said proudly. Proper military action. Objectives achieved, honor maintained, conflict resolved without unnecessary destruction. What was the objective? Admiral Chen asked. The question puzzled the Federation officers. To respond to Kethtar aggression, of course. But they'll be back, Colonel Martinez pointed out. They lost some personnel, but their ships are intact. Their leadership is unchanged, and they still believe raiding is profitable. This resolved nothing. That is not the point, High Command Velnari explained patiently. The point is to maintain proper relationships between species while allowing for necessary competition and conflict. The humans requested permission to return to Earth for consultation with their government. The Federation Council, confident that the demonstration had shown them proper military behavior, granted the request. They expected the humans to return with better understanding of civilized warfare. Instead, Admiral Chen came back with reinforcements. The human fleet that returned to Federation space was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Not just warships, but hospital ships, engineering vessels, communication platforms, and supply trains that seemed to stretch across entire star systems. The Federation observers counted more support personnel than combat troops. Admiral, High Command Velnari asked with growing concern, why have you brought such an extensive force? Are you expecting a major engagement? We're preparing for the possibility, Chen replied. Our intelligence indicates that Kethtar raids have been increasing in frequency and scope. We believe they're testing Federation responses to evaluate weakness. Intelligence. The concept still puzzled many Federation species. The Kethtar conducted raids because it was their cultural tradition. Sometimes they succeeded, sometimes they failed. It was not a coordinated strategy. You misunderstand their nature, General Thaxui insisted. Kethtar are not strategic thinkers. They are warriors who seek honorable combat and material gain through traditional means. Our analysis suggests otherwise, Colonel Martinez said, producing detailed reports that made the aliens' translation matrices work overtime. Pattern analysis of their raids shows increasing coordination, systematic targeting of key resources, and careful timing to avoid major Federation forces. The humans presented evidence that the Federation military leaders had never considered gathering. Economic data showing the impact of raids on border world productivity. Communication intercepts revealing coordination between supposedly independent raiding groups. Strategic analysis indicating that the raids were not random cultural expressions, but calculated tests of Federation resolve. Even if this is true, Commander Vorth protested, the proper response is to match their escalation gradually. Increase our own forces proportionally, maintain balance, seek negotiated settlements. No, Admiral Chen said firmly. The proper response is to end their ability to threaten Federation worlds. End their ability? The concept horrified the alien observers. You cannot simply eliminate their military capability. That would be genocide. Not genocide, Chen corrected. Military defeat. Complete, decisive, and permanent. The Federation Council convened an emergency session as reports arrived of human fleet movements throughout border sectors. The humans were not positioning their forces for traditional engagements. They were surrounding entire Kethtar systems, cutting off supply lines and demanding unconditional surrender. This is unprecedented, High Command Velnari announced to the packed council chamber. The humans are conducting what they call total war against the Kethtar Imperium. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when someone applied professional military doctrine to a conflict that had been treated as a cultural exchange for centuries. The Kethtar, confident in their warrior traditions and experienced in fighting opponents who followed predictable rules, were about to face an enemy that fought to win rather than to maintain balance. The education was accelerating for everyone involved. The Kethtar War Council convened in the ancient halls of their homeworld, beneath banners that had flown for 1,000 years of glorious raids. War leader Thakamor paced before the assembled clan chiefs, his ceremonial weapons clattering with each agitated step. These humans fight without honor, he declared, his voice echoing off stone walls carved with victories. They refuse proper challenge. They attack our supply ships. They target our communication relays. This is not warfare, it is cowardice. Clan Chief Velkara, scarred veteran of hundreds of raids, rose from her ceremonial seat. Perhaps we underestimated them. Their victory at Hadrian Prime was unexpected. One victory means nothing, Thakamor snarled. They caught us by surprise with their strange tactics. Now we know what to expect. We will adapt and crush them in proper combat. What the Kethtar leadership did not understand was that humans had been studying them for months. Every raid, every ship movement, every communication had been analyzed and cataloged. Human intelligence officers had built comprehensive profiles of Kethtar leadership, military capabilities, economic systems, and cultural blind spots. Admiral Chen stood before the holographic display in her command center, watching real-time updates from across Kethtar space. Her staff had been working around the clock to coordinate the most complex military operation in Federation history. Status report, she called to her operations officer. All task forces in position. Colonel Martinez replied. Intelligence confirms Kethtar fleets are concentrated around their 3 main worlds. They appear to be preparing for traditional large-scale engagements. Communication interception shows they're trying to organize a grand alliance, added Major Kim from the intelligence section. They want to mass their forces for decisive battles that will restore their honor. Admiral Chen nodded. The Kethtar were doing exactly what human analysts had predicted. Faced with an unconventional enemy, they were doubling down on their traditional approaches rather than adapting. It was a classic mistake that human military historians had observed throughout Earth's own bloody past. Execute Operation Stranglehold, Chen ordered. Across 17 star systems, human forces began implementing tactics that the galaxy had never seen before. Instead of massing for spectacular fleet battles, they systematically destroyed everything that supported Kethtar military operations. Supply convoys disappeared without trace. Communication networks went dark. Mining operations found their equipment mysteriously sabotaged. The Federation observers watched in growing alarm as human special operations teams conducted missions that seemed to violate every principle of civilized warfare. They didn't attack military forces directly. Instead, they targeted the infrastructure that allowed military forces to function. This is barbaric, General Thaksui protested during an emergency briefing. They're destroying civilian economic targets. We're targeting military-relevant infrastructure, corrected Colonel Martinez. Fuel refineries, communication hubs, shipbuilding facilities, everything we're hitting supports their raiding operations. But those facilities employ non-combatants, Commander Veltar gurgled in distress. You're affecting civilian populations. We're evacuating civilians before any operations, Major Kim explained. Our psychological warfare teams have been broadcasting warnings for weeks. Anyone who wants to leave the target areas can do so safely. Psychological warfare? The concept horrified the alien observers. The idea of attacking enemy morale and will to fight, rather than simply defeating them in combat, seemed deeply wrong to species that viewed warfare as a test of honor and courage. You're trying to break their spirit, the Shard observer chimed accusingly. This is not how warriors should behave. We're trying to end the war, Admiral Chen replied firmly. Every day this continues, more people die on both sides. The fastest way to stop the killing is to convince the Kethtar that continuing is hopeless. The Kethtar response to human tactics was exactly what Chen's staff had predicted. Unable to engage in the large fleet battles they preferred, frustrated by an enemy that refused to fight honorably, they began making increasingly desperate attempts to force the humans into traditional combat. War leader Thakmor led a massive raid against the human base at Proxima Station, bringing together the largest Kethtar fleet in their history, 300 ships carrying 20,000 warriors, determined to achieve the glorious victory that would restore their reputation. They found Proxima Station empty, except for automated defenses, and a single message from Admiral Chen. If you want to fight us, you'll have to find us first. The human fleet had scattered across a dozen systems, using mobility and intelligence to avoid decisive engagement while continuing their systematic destruction of Kethtar capabilities. Every time the raiders massed for attack, their targets disappeared. Every time they tried to return to traditional raiding, they found their targets prepared and defended. This is not warfare, Thakmor broadcast to the galaxy in his frustration. These humans are cowards who refuse to fight with honor. Admiral Chen's response was transmitted across every communication channel in Kethtar space. We are fighting. We're fighting to protect innocent people from raiders. We're fighting to end this conflict permanently. If you want it to stop, surrender unconditionally and disarm your raiding fleets. The demand shocked both the Kethtar and their Federation observers. Unconditional surrender was not how civilized species ended conflicts. There were always negotiations, compromises, face-saving measures that allowed everyone to claim some form of victory. You cannot demand total capitulation. High Command Velnari protested to Admiral Chen. The Kethtar have legitimate cultural needs that must be respected. Their cultural needs involve raiding and enslaving other people, Chen replied. Those are not legitimate needs. Those are criminal behaviors that need to stop. The war entered its final phase when human forces launched simultaneous operations against all three Kethtar homeworlds, not invasion forces but precision strikes against specific targets. Government buildings, military command centers, communication hubs, and the ceremonial halls where clan chiefs met to plan their raids. The attacks lasted exactly 6 hours. When they ended, the Kethtar Imperium had lost its ability to coordinate military operations. Its leadership was scattered or captured, and its population was receiving continuous broadcasts explaining how they could surrender safely. You have destroyed their entire governmental structure, the Maulery. Observer released pheromones of shock and horror. How can they surrender if they have no leaders to negotiate with? Individual ships and commanders can surrender to any human force, Admiral Chen explained. We're not looking for complex negotiations. We want them to stop raiding, disarm their fleets, and agree to peaceful resolution of any future disputes. But their culture, Commander Vorth protested. Raiding is central to their identity. You're asking them to abandon everything that makes them who they are. We're asking them to stop attacking innocent people, Colonel Martinez said bluntly. They can find new cultural expressions that don't involve violence against others. The first Kethtar surrenders began within hours of the coordinated strikes. Ship after ship broadcast surrender signals, their crews confused and demoralized by facing an enemy that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. War leader Thakmor, captured during the assault on the primary command center, issued a formal statement that the galaxy would remember for centuries. The humans do not fight like warriors, he said, his ceremonial armor replaced with simple prisoner clothing. They fight like... He struggled to find words for something his culture had no concept of. They fight like forces of nature, unstoppable, implacable, without mercy or honor. We fight like soldiers, Admiral Chen corrected when she met with him to discuss surrender terms. Professional soldiers whose job is to protect people and accomplish missions. Honor comes from doing that job well, not from following rules that make war easier for our enemies. The Kethtar Imperium formally surrendered 4 days later. Their entire raiding fleet was disarmed, their military leadership was removed from power, and their worlds were placed under temporary human administration while new, peaceful governments were established. The Federation Council convened an emergency session to address what many delegates were calling the human problem. These primitive newcomers had just accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history, the complete military defeat of an established empire in less than 3 months. What are we dealing with? High Command Velnari asked the assembled representatives. What kind of species wages war like this? The answer would reshape the galaxy's understanding of conflict, diplomacy, and the nature of professional military force. Humanity had not just won a war, they had demonstrated that everything the Federation thought it knew about warfare was wrong. The Great Assembly Chamber of the Galactic Federation had never hosted a session like this one. Representatives from every member species filled the vast space, while emergency delegations from dozens of non-member civilizations watched from observation galleries. The air itself seemed heavy with uncertainty and fear. High Command Velnari of the Altarian Defense Force stood at the central podium, her forearms trembling slightly as she activated the holographic displays. The Kethtar Imperium has formally surrendered unconditionally to human forces. Their raiding fleets have been disarmed. Their military leadership has been removed from power. Their homeworlds are under human administration. A collective shudder passed through the assembly. In 3,000 years of galactic civilization, no empire had ever been so completely defeated. Wars were limited affairs with negotiated conclusions. The concept of total victory was alien to everyone present except the human delegation. How is this possible? Demanded the crystalline shard representative, their voice like breaking glass. The Kethtar had thousands of ships and hundreds of thousands of warriors. They were one of the major military powers in this sector. General Thaxui activated additional displays showing the timeline of human operations. The humans achieved complete victory in 73 standard days. They accomplished this with forces smaller than what the Kethtar committed to single raids. The numbers on the holographic display seemed impossible to most observers. The humans had deployed fewer ships, fewer personnel, and fewer resources than their enemies, yet they had achieved total strategic success while suffering minimal casualties. Explain their methods, ordered Council Prime Zathara of the Voidborn Collective. What did they do that we do not understand? Admiral Chen stood to address the assembly, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the agitation visible throughout the chamber. We applied professional military doctrine to achieve specific strategic objectives. Our goal was to permanently end Kethtar raiding activities with minimum loss of life on all sides. Professional military doctrine? The Molari ambassador released confused pheromones. What does this mean? It means we treat warfare as a problem to be solved rather than a cultural ritual to be performed, Colonel Martinez explained. We study our enemies, identify their weaknesses, and exploit those weaknesses systematically until they can no longer fight effectively. The alien representatives struggled to process this concept. For millennia, they had viewed conflict as a natural expression of species competition. Wars happened when diplomatic solutions failed, but they were conducted according to established rules that maintained stability and allowed all sides to preserve some measure of honor. But the Kethtar culture protested Commander Veltar of the Aquarian Defense. Force raiding was central to their identity. You have destroyed their entire way of life. We have ended their ability to harm innocent people, Admiral Chen replied firmly. Their culture can adapt and find new expressions that don't involve violence against others. What about their honor? Asked the Ursai representative, his massive form leaning forward with concern. How can warriors live without the possibility of glorious combat? Major Kim stepped forward with her data tablet active. Our cultural analysis teams are working with Kethtar communities to develop alternative expressions for their competitive drives. Sports competitions, exploration missions, scientific challenges. There are many ways to test courage and skill without raiding other people's homes. The concept horrified many delegates. The humans were not just military conquerors. They were social engineers actively reshaping the cultures they defeated. This went far beyond traditional warfare into territory that seemed fundamentally wrong to species, that viewed cultural development as a natural process. You are changing who they are. the ethereal void-born representative observed, their smoky form shifting with distress. This is cultural destruction on a massive scale. This is cultural evolution, Admiral Chen corrected. Societies change when their old ways stop working. The Kethtar way of life was unsustainable because it depended on victimizing others. We're helping them find sustainable alternatives. High Command Velnari called up new displays showing the current situation in former Kethtar space. Show us what you have done with their worlds. The images revealed something unprecedented in galactic history. Human forces had not simply occupied Kethtar planets. They were actively rebuilding their societies from the ground up. Infrastructure was being repaired and expanded. Educational systems were being established. Democratic institutions were being created where none had existed before. This is not occupation, General Thaksui said with amazement. This is transformation. This is nation building, Admiral Chen confirmed. We don't just defeat enemies. We help them become productive members of the galactic community. Nation building? The concept required extensive translation matrix work to convey to species that had never experienced such comprehensive social reconstruction. Colonel Martinez activated additional displays, showing human activities across the former Kethtar worlds. We're establishing local governments based on democratic principles, training local security forces to maintain order without oppressing their populations, creating economic opportunities that provide alternatives to raiding. You are creating them in your own image, accused the Granite Lord delegate, their stone voice grinding with disapproval. We're creating them in the image of peaceful, productive societies, Chen replied. If that happens to resemble human organization, it's because humans have extensive experience in transitioning from warrior cultures to peaceful ones. The revelation that humanity had its own history of cultural transformation shocked many delegates. They had viewed the humans as naturally aggressive primitives who had somehow developed advanced military capabilities. The idea that they had deliberately evolved beyond their violent origins was disturbing. How long did this transformation take for your species? Asked Council Prime Zethara. Centuries, Admiral Chen admitted. We made many mistakes along the way, lost millions of people to wars that accomplished nothing, nearly destroyed our world several times. We learned the hard way that warfare must serve constructive purposes or it becomes meaningless, destruction. And now you impose these lessons on others. The Shard Observer chimed accusingly. We share these lessons with others, Chen corrected. The Kethtar can choose to learn from human experience or they can develop their own paths to peaceful civilization. But they cannot continue raiding other people's worlds. The debate continued for hours as delegates struggled to comprehend the implications of human victory. The galaxy had suddenly discovered that one of its newest members possessed military capabilities that made all their established assumptions obsolete. What are your intentions? High Command Velnari finally asked directly. What do humans want from the Federation? Admiral Chen's response silenced the entire assembly. We want to prevent unnecessary wars. We want to protect innocent people from aggressors. We want to help build a galaxy where conflicts are resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than violence. And if we refuse your help? Asked the Malari ambassador. Then you'll continue losing people to preventable conflicts, Chen replied. The choice is yours. But understand that we will not allow aggressor species to attack Federation worlds while we have the capability to stop them. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. The humans were not seeking conquest or dominance. They were offering to serve as the Federation's military protectors. But protection from humans would mean accepting human standards for what constituted acceptable behavior. You are offering to become our enforcers, Council Prime Zethara observed. We are offering to become your protectors, Admiral Chen corrected. There's a significant difference. The emergency session concluded with no formal decisions, but everyone present understood that the galaxy had fundamentally changed. A species that treated warfare as a profession rather than a cultural expression had just demonstrated capabilities that made traditional military thinking obsolete. In the weeks that followed, applications for Federation membership increased dramatically, as smaller species sought protection under the human military umbrella. Meanwhile, aggressive empires began re-evaluating their expansion plans in light of what had happened to the Kethtar. The age of limited ritualized warfare was ending. The galaxy was entering an era where conflicts would be resolved quickly and decisively by professionals who fought to win rather than to maintain balance. Some species embraced this new reality, others feared it, but everyone understood that they could no longer ignore the implications of human military doctrine. The galaxy had discovered what a human professional army truly was. Not just a military force, but an agent of social change that could reshape entire civilizations. The Federation would never be the same.